Hi everybody! I'm award-winning author and illustrator Bethany Barton. McLean and Eakin booksellers asked me to make this video to talk to you all about some very important books. They know how much I love talking about books, so they also gave me a time limit, so I'd probably better get started. I make books that ask kids to face their fears using superpowers like facts, critical thinking, humor, and empathy. I've done this with books like I'm Trying to Love Spiders, Give Bees a Chance, and I'm Trying to Love Math. I found out that when you face something that either scares you or intimidates you, if you can learn more about the thing and why it scares you, why it is the way that it is, why it has to be that way, and how it's useful and helpful in the world, you can take away a lot of the fear, especially if you can empathize with it, like with spiders or bees, and if you can see how you use it in your everyday life, and especially if you can laugh at the things that scare you. If you can laugh at something that scares you, it takes away most of its power to be scary. So, my most recent book, the brand new one, get excited, fanfare, is I'm Trying to Love Rocks. So you might be thinking, people aren't scared or intimidated by rocks, and you'd be right. I mean, I don't think they are. But this book, I took my concept and I sort of went on a little detour. Because while rocks themselves aren't scary, I think a lot of kids are freaked out by the idea of boredom or having to learn something that sounds boring, right? Kids are so used to being constantly entertained that when you say, hey, we're going to learn about rocks, the idea of boredom being there is super scary. But when faced with the facts of a STEM subject like rocks, geology is actually super exciting. This book was a lot of fun to make. I actually worked with a real live geologist, and funny story, so I have a day job outside of making books where I work in film and TV. And another friend of mine, Billy Jack Jory, has worked with me for years in film and TV in the art department for commercials and movies. Well, he left to go become a geologist, and I told him that sounded super boring, and why would you stop making movies to study rocks? Well, turns out rocks are super interesting, and he was the geologist that I got to meet with. We got to talk about what the earth is made of. We got to talk about how rocks are constantly changing. I didn't know that, okay, and I went to college. We also came up with fun analogies, like how metamorphic rock is rock that changes from extreme heat or pressure, kind of like how popcorn kernels become popcorn. I really enjoy making STEM books because the world is naturally fascinating and it's so easy to be distracted in our very noisy, blinky, exciting technological world. And I want to keep reminding kids that there are things in their backyard that they can find that are literally time machines back to history that might not look like they're moving, but they're changing all the time. So that was part of why I made this book and part of why I think it's going to be interesting to kids and really useful in the classroom, because it doesn't only present itself as an educational book, it also presents itself as just a funny book. So the voice of being afraid of being bored is the voice of the narrator, me, and the day is saved by this gal right here. She's the president of the Rock Club. I will say, victory in my home, my son now has a rock collection, and he calls himself a rock scientist, and he looks at the rocks underneath this cool little magnifying glass light up thing he got from Grandpa. So, victory for rock science. Go geology. Okay, I'm running out of time here, so if you want to get any of these awesome books and help kids in your family or classroom face their fears using facts, critical thinking, humor, and empathy, you know where to find these books. McLean and Eakin booksellers. Now I'm going to tell you some of my favorite books. Here we go. I only have 1 minute. My first recommendation, The Old Truck by the Pumphrey Brothers. I love this book for so many reasons. First of all, the artwork. The Pumphrey Brothers created all of these custom stamps to create this beautiful retro look. I like to say that looking at this book feels like laying in warm sunshine. Isn't it beautiful? Secondly, I feel like kids are inundated with messages about you need the newest thing, the shiniest thing, the next version of the thing. But this book celebrates things that are old and that have a history. And if you value and cherish and put your time and energy and hard work into those things, that they can go from being part of your history and your memory and become part of your story now, which I think is such an important message to share with kids right now. Also, I love the representation. There are Black women in there, and it's not a story about the civil rights movement, even though those books are super important. It's just nice to have stories of Black people in America just being human and doing human things, and it doesn't have to be about their Blackness. They can just be Black and have their life. You know what I'm saying? I hope you know what I'm saying. The Old Truck. Buy 2 copies. I did because we accidentally left one at Grandma's. Second book recommendation, Myth Atlas by Thiago de Moraes. This book is incredible. My son takes it with us everywhere. That's why it's a little beat. It talks about myths from all over the planet. Aztec, Yoruba, Egyptian, Greek, Norse, Slavic, Hindu, Japanese, Polynesian. My son is obsessed with good guys and bad guys, warrior stories, and this book has them in spades. It's gloriously illustrated. And it's filled with short stories. So you can hear the myths from different ethnic groups, different regions, and you get a sampling of some of the myths, you get some of their creatures and artifacts, you get a little bit of their history, you get important characters from their myths. And my son can stare at this in the back of the car for hours and not get bored. We read the stories to him because he's only 6. And then he goes through and looks at the pictures and reminds himself of all the stories. This is the gift that keeps on giving. We're obsessed with this book. He has another one coming out soon. I think it's called The History Atlas, and we will certainly be buying it. Okay, book number 3. Odd and the Frost Giants by Neil Gaiman. This one is illustrated by Chris Rydell, and the illustrations are just amazing. This book is actually a retelling of a Norse myth. And so if your kids or students are familiar with Thor and Loki and Odin, has all those same characters, although in this book they have been turned into animals. So there they are. There's Thor, he's a bear. And Loki is a fox, if you can see him at the bottom. I see this book as sort of a gateway into longer fantasy tales like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Because it's shorter, so, you know, if you have a slightly less of an attention span or a younger reading level, it is a little above my 6-year-old reading level, so we also got the audiobook, which Neil Gaiman reads himself, and it's fantastic, and he does all the voices, and he makes Thor really, really funny. So my son will follow along in the book and laugh out loud, and that way he can sort of read the story, even though it's above his reading level. Last but not least, I know I'm out of time, but the main character, Odd, is actually disabled and differently abled. He uses a crutch, but he is just as brave and adventurous, and he moves at a different pace, but at an incredible rate, and he's a wonderful character, and I love the representation there. Odd and the Frost Giants. Get yourself one. Okay, final book. Everything You Need for a Treehouse by Carter Higgins and Emily Hughes. Had to get another lady author and illustrator situation in here. Everything You Need for a Treehouse. Isn't that glorious? I keep saying glorious. Apparently that's my new word. Everything You Need for a Treehouse gives you so many beautiful different worlds where treehouses could be. My son was really enamored with this, and still very much is, because we live in Los Angeles and big crazy tree houses are not something you find all the time. But it reminds you how much of a treehouse is imagination, how much of a treehouse is you just creating a space from your imagination and putting it in a place where you can go and be. And my son said he had really fun dreams after reading this, so we like to read this one a lot. My favorite spread is at the very end, and some kids are on their porch and they've planted a tree and they're waiting for it to grow so they can have a tree house. That's it. Those are the books. Get excited, get involved, and most of all, if you're getting those books, you know where you should buy them? I have a suggestion. McLean and Eakin Booksellers from Petoskey, Michigan. Nicest people in the world, and they have amazing books. So make sure you check those books out, maybe even check my book out. Pick some up. Thanks so much. Bye.